Well, hello there. This is Vichas the Chess Noob, learning and having fun with chess. Welcome to another episode of Chess Noob Game Review, where the focus will be seeing how a game could have been improved. Haven't made one of these in a little while, but in this game where I played against the Vienna Gambit in the Vienna game mainline, I learned a few things during the analysis, and I thought this would be useful to share to everybody. So let's go take a look. I have the black pieces. White begins with the Vienna. So e4, e5, knight c3. My personal favorite opening. And against the Vienna, when I play against the Vienna, I want to bait people into the main line. So the Falkbeard, knight to f6, almost always. They'll play a Vienna Gambit, assuming that they did this deliberately. Very, very good if you accept, but of course I know best move is the main line. The d5 captures, and in this position, most of my preparation has been expecting that white will play the Paulson attack with queen to f3. That is, in modern stockfish analysis, to be the most accurate move. It's quite aggressive, so fits in the style of someone wanting to play a Vienna or Vienna Gambit. However, that's not the only option. So in this game, my opponent played knight to f3. There's two knights approach. It's the classical main line. And here I only had a very superficial understanding of what to do. So this is perfectly fine for white. It leads to potentially a somewhat more positional style in the Vienna game main line. And so I had a sort of long think on what to do. Now, if you look at stockfish analysis, the idea that generally makes sense here is that maybe move that bishop, so the king's bishop, so that we can immediately short castle. So for us in the Vienna game main line with the black pieces, we do have some counterplay, but this pawn often becomes a bit of a problem, becomes a bit problematic. And getting the king out of the center is often a good idea. The mistake would be to capture. So that is absolutely not good. You should not do that. And with stockfish, where should the bishop go? So stockfish reckons that probably bishop to e7 is best, but bishop to c5 is almost just as good. And of course, that makes a lot of sense. In fact, that's the move I was really looking at, because once the bishop goes to c5, you've got that very, very nice two attackers on black's f2 square. And notice with the exchange here, and with white not really immediately having a sort of a knockout sort of a attack, a knockout punch with gaining the initiative, they are potentially quite weak along that dark square diagonal to their king. So bishop to c5 is the sort of move that I would like. When we look at the Lead Chess Community database, the potential most winning position for black is, again, bishop to e7 and the aggressive bishop to b4. So when we look at Lead Chess, that looks like they're the most winning moves, but the reality is it's not too different. Any of the bishop moves are roughly the same. However, the problem with bishop to c5, which is probably my preferred move, is that white has a very obvious next move, which is d4, winning sort of tempo on the bishop. It sort of defends their e5 pawn. This is still perfectly good for black, and black's next move is perhaps to move the bishop a second time. So interesting play. I didn't particularly like that. So the move I was thinking of in the game, and notice, I wasn't actually entirely sure what was the best move in this game. I hadn't looked at the classical all too much until after this game during the analysis, was to develop my queen's knight. So knight to c6, basically adding another potential defender there, and then bishop there, probably the turn afterwards. So that's what I was thinking. And This is a move that has been played. So the knight to c6, even though it's not the most accurate move, definitely has been played by various chess masters, particularly in the 19th century. Have a look at the article attached to this video. Description link to this is in the description. I go through some historical games to just show actually how good potentially this knight to c6 move is. And the thing with this move is that it really does potentially lock white down a particular pathway. So here they make a mistake. This is a blunder. Obviously they weren't sure what to do. They give sort of a waiting sort of move. The only really good move for white here is to pin with the bishop to b5, pin my knight to the king. So this knight having the attack or the attack on the d4 square with the bishop move next is actually really powerful. Bishop to c5. And here, two attackers, so they have to do something. Again, a logical move is d4. And unfortunately here, I didn't quite grasp, I think. It wasn't able to implement some of the ideas I kind of knew, but actually to make it work tactically. So the thing here is it looks like that there are two defenders of that d4 pawn. I've got two attackers, and normally you need one extra attacker to make the attack work. However, the thing is, this knight must defend the h4 square against queen h4 check. So this knight is not really defending that pawn. That was something I didn't quite appreciate, and it's something that, if they took, and there's a historical game in the article linked to this video, where if they take back, so let's say captures, and they take back, that is a major blunder. In fact, look at that. Black has checkmate in 6. And what it looks like is queen to h4 with check. And basically, they're in some real trouble. So they can block, check again, and you can see these are all the squares covered by my pieces. Basically, white's king is forced to move into specific squares. Everything is forced. There we go. Check again. Forced here. Check. Forced back. And now the knight here with check. King has only two potential legal squares. So this square and this square. But in either of those squares, queen to f2 is mate. So this is a potentially really trappy line. So if I take and they take back, it makes sense for them to take back, it's end of the game. Now in this game, I didn't quite recognize it was that powerful. I now know that to be the case, and in fact I moved the bishop. So bishop to the pin. So you can sort of see sort of the logic before, but with the knight there, I didn't actually need to move the bishop. All right, they moved their queen forward, makes sense. And here I decided that I wanted to pull the bishop back. And what I was seeing potentially is check. And if they capture, then potentially I have another check. And I thought that was potentially very winning. Of course, the problem is that they don't really need to capture. But that's what I was thinking. So setting up a potential trap. However, this backwards move does result in a loss of tempo. And you can see white sort of gains a little bit of the lead. So they take, I take back. They capture here. Unfortunately, no longer available because that square is now defended twice. Develop my other bishop, just develop pieces. That is not quite accurate. Now, at around this position, I sort of recognize that I've somehow stuffed up the opening. So after, with that capture, I've basically lost a point of material. And I realize, this can't actually be good for black. White has some good development. I'm in some trouble. So after this move, the idea actually here was I'm gonna need to make some threats. I'm gonna need to make repeated attacks on white, and the idea behind these repeated sort of attacks, so this romantic aggressive style, is that I'm inviting white to make a mistake, to poke and prod at their potential weaknesses to see whether or not I get something. Their queen is in a good position. However, one of the things when the queen is out early is that potentially you can chase the queen, so attack the opponent's queen with minor pieces, gain a bit of development, maybe win some tempo. At least it forces white to play very accurately. And if they don't play accurately, of course, that's a mistake. You can potentially win something. So my idea here was to play bishop e6 and then bishop d5, attack on the queen, notionally quite a good square, quite a good diagonal for my bishop to be on, the long like square diagonal. They moved the queen here. That wasn't the most accurate move. And you can see we're starting to move back towards equality. Here I give a check, come on, take, they make the best move. Here they had to move their king as the best move, so they made it. So I thought, okay, bit of trouble. Another poke, another prod. What are you going to do? I'm going to attack their bishop. Now, here, one of the things that I saw potentially is, is there some attack here? Can I somehow get some sort of attack? Maybe there, that's the sort of things I was seeing. Didn't have a form strategy. I was just poking and prodding. But against this, white now makes a blunder. So white, I think, has a bit of a loss aversion type bias. So it's a cognitive bias. You don't want to lose material, because here, the simplest thing that they can do, the upper bit of material, is that they can just damage potentially my structure, or at least just trade their bishop. This bishop is at risk of potentially being trapped. They can just trade their bishop for my knight, and it's fine. There's still upper point of material. But because I didn't want to trade their bishop, because notionally a bishop is better than a knight. You trade away a bishop, they lose the bishop pair. But that's what they should have done. They should have just traded. But instead, they decided to go aggro. I can understand that. They played c4, counter-attacking my bishop. Also, potentially, if going back, can evacuate their bishop. That makes potentially a lot of sense. However, it's a mistake. It's a mistake because that's still hanging, and I can trade my bishop for their knight with a check, which means I win a point of tempo. White here at least loses their bishop. So bishop captures, check, forces potentially the king to move, but here white makes another mistake. They can capture with the king, capture with the pawn, capture with the queen, and they probably didn't want to sort of move their pawn and maybe end up with an isolated outside h-pawn, which is actually kind of fine. They decided to capture with their queen. That's another mistake, at least an inaccuracy, because what I saw, knight now potentially has a royal fork. Still pinned, very easy, capture, and of course, if they capture back, royal fork. Absolutely fantastic. Here, they saw that was coming, so they decide to defend that pawn with the bishop. That is the correct move. However, here, what I can do is a really audacious queen sacrifice. That's a trappy move. You can see back to 0-0-0. It's back to 0-0-0 because the queen can just straight up capture with check, and after captures, they basically just win my knight. Okay, so they win back that lost numerical piece. However, what I'm basically baiting them to do is if they capture, bang, royal fork. So that's what they're staring at. It's not so easy to see that they have to sacrifice their queen first. Now, this was obviously not the best move. The best move here is a very simple royal fork, check, forces that capture, and win. So basically, I win another pawn. But here, I'm doubling down, take, baiting them to take. They don't find the right move, which is the queen captures the knight on c6 with check, and instead they capture this way, putting pressure on my knight. That's a mistake. Can you see it? Because bang, capture, check. This practically forces the king onto, well, no, can't go there because it's defended, forces the king onto the back rank, and then of course, bang, there'll be a skewer. So they didn't want to do that. Instead, they block the check with the bishop, but of course, that loses sight of d4 square. Knight jumps forward.
Emotional damage!
Royal fork, emotional damage. Good game, GG. The big takeaway in this game is to be sensitized to some of the tactics that Black has when playing the Vienna game main line, especially against that weak dark square diagonal to White's king, and also the illusory control that White's knight has on the d4 square. I hope you enjoyed this video, and thanks for watching.